Hello and welcome to Newsmax Now. I'm John Bachman. First tonight, the highly polarized reaction to President Trump's historic meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the DMZ. Today, North Korea's state media praised the surprise meeting as a chance for a breakthrough in the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. President Trump, who became the first sitting U.S. president to set foot on North Korean soil, said stepping across the line of demarcation was a, quote, great honor.
I just want to say that this is my honor. I didn't really expect it. We were in Japan for the G20. We came over and I said, hey, I'm over here. I want to call Chairman Kim. And we got to meet, and stepping across that line was a great honor.
Now, after the meeting, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the two leaders agreed to restart the denuclearization talks next month.
We thought there might be this opportunity, and the president, by getting together with Chairman Kim today, broke through and was able to get us the opportunity to get back to the negotiating table, which I'm excited about. It's good for North Koreans, good for America, good for the world.
All right, joining us now to talk more about the reaction to President Trump's meeting with Kim Jong-un is former State Department senior advisor Christian White, who's joining us tonight live from Berlin. Christian, great to see you, and thanks for staying up late with us.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
All right, by the way, what time is it in Berlin now anyway?
Oh, it's just a little after midnight.
Okay. All right. Not too late. That's pretty normal for Berlin time. But let's start with President Trump in his own words. Here he is speaking in South Korea just before he met with Kim Jong-un at the DMZ. Take a listen.
A lot of good things are happening with North Korea. I really believe that. A lot of good things. Relationship is very good. When I first came here, it was a disaster. It was a disaster. In my opinion, had President Obama or somebody like President Obama, for instance, my opponent in the last election, had it worked that way, I honestly believe you would have been at war with North Korea.
All right. Also, we want to welcome into the discussion tonight Newsmax CEO Ruddy, who just came back from Japan. Chris, great to see you. When you guys were in Japan, I know there was talk about meeting with President Trump and Chairman Kim, but did you think things would go this far?
I don't think there was any expectation that he was going to see Chairman Kim. There was a lot of rumors in the press, John, when I was over there, even I think when I started in with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on his trip from India to Japan, that the president might go to the DMZ. So that wasn't even confirmed until the day before, essentially. And, you know, just chatting a second about what you and Christian were talking about, how momentous this is, just look back a few years ago. Every president since Harry Truman has been kicking the can down the road on this case with Korea. The template of how this was resolved, Korea would do something crazy like fire some missiles or detonate a nuclear weapon. We, in turn, would give them a multi-billion-dollar aid package, and they would claim to comply to certain requests that we made about not developing weapons. Donald Trump said, this is crazy that we keep doing this. We're going to, and after all of those agreements, they've only become stronger. They have at least 30 nuclear weapons. They now have thermonuclear weapons, which are the really big hydrogen bomb type weapons. So Donald Trump comes along and says, we're going to rewrite this whole thing. I'm going to go and try to develop a personal relationship with this guy. And so far, he comes out very strong. Remember, the president said, look, he was willing to create Fire and Fury, which was the title of a book, against Korea that they had never seen in history before. And he came on very strong. He personally attacked the North Korean leader. And now they're friends. They're on friendly terms, we should say. And at least for the past 2 years, there haven't been any new developments on ballistic weapons. They haven't fired any more long-range missiles, which is very important for our security. There's been no more nuclear testing. So a lot of positive developments. And I have to hand it to the president that he alone is moving this needle. Now, he's not naive to think he's going to get a comprehensive peace deal. I've talked to him about it. He certainly thinks that that's a possibility, but he's also not so sure. He's going to see how this thing builds. But he's not like, if you watch CNN today or MSNBC, it sounds like the president is is Neville Chamberlain at Munich. He certainly is not.
Those comparisons have been made a lot today, not surprisingly, Christian. And also, there was this article in the New York Times, as we've talked about on this program many times, there's almost like this preconceived notion in the media that the president is going to fail no matter what. The New York Times article talked about a nuclear freeze. And of course, National Security Advisor John Bolton dismissed this report, which claimed that Washington was softening its approach with North Korea, even floating the idea of accepting this nuclear freeze instead of complete denuclearization. Here was Bolton's response. He said this, quote, on a tweet, "I read this New York Times story with curiosity. Neither the NSC staff nor I have discussed or heard of any desire to settle for a nuclear freeze by North Korea. This was a reprehensible attempt by someone to box in the president. There should be consequences." Christian, do you agree? Should there be consequences for this type of reporting? And do you think that an article in the New York Times can actually box in the president the way Bolton described?
Yeah, I think there should be marketplace consequences for that. The New York Times has really been on a roll for getting things wrong recently. Their star reporters at the White House, Maggie Haberman, came out with a report that, basically the deal we got from Mexico for putting tariffs on them was nothing. It amounted to nothing. It would change nothing. It was the same as everything on the table. Lo and behold, it actually was something very significant. It was something very new. The tariffs worked, and we're already starting to see some results, not enough results, but some. So these people who purport to have great ties within this administration, when they talk and they quote people who are close to the White House, I don't know if they mean the bums outside in Lafayette Park, but they don't have real sources within this administration. And so, I think you should see the New York Times for what it is. It's sort of a bulletin board for progressive, coastal, liberal elites, Upper West Side types. But if you're looking for accurate information on the administration, don't look at the New York Times. Don't look at CNN.
John?
As far as the impact, I travel a lot in Asia. I'm in Europe now. It is problematic. I think that you have foreign leaders who are still influenced by establishment media. I think a lot of them thought that Trump's power was ebbing, that Trump was heading for defeat, that Trump would be impeached, that the Mueller investigation would
a lot of foreign powers, they are hoping they can just wait President Trump out. But of course, Chris, as you know, that's not going to be the case with Kim Jong-un. President Trump has to work with a dictator that's in power at the time when the president's in power.
Well, he's a guy that likes to close a deal, and I think he knows time is of the essence. So I don't think he's just going to let the clock run out here on it if they think that he might not be reelected. And I think that's not a smart bet to make. I think that the New York Times story here, John, I think Christian's right. They don't necessarily have sources. I call it guessing journalism. They're just guessing what the president may do. I haven't spoken to the president about it, but I do think there's a very real possibility that we may do a deal that's not a full denuclearization. I don't think anyone thinks the North Koreans are voluntarily going to give up all of their nuclear weapons. So I think a realistic...
And why should they? Why should they? When you look at the Gaddafi model in Libya, I mean, that is a security blanket for these dictators. That's why Iran, in many cases, wants to develop a nuclear program, because it puts them in this category where they have to be dealt with in this way. Of course, Chris, as you talk, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, the only way we ever get rid of those weapons is if we go to full-blown war, which might be a regional nuclear war. I don't see that. I could see the president doing a deal where he limits dramatically the number of nuclear warheads they have, but importantly denies them the ballistic missile abilities and says to them, if you have any of these missiles, we're going to blow them apart and go to the brink of war. So I do see some deal coming along those lines, but that's something for the president to work out. I'm sure the New York Times is not privy to the details here.
You would hope not. And, these things do take a long time, and we're still very early in this process if you look at the timescale of other similar peace pacts that have been made. Now, of course, as predicted, and predictably so, some of Trump's 2020 challengers hopped on the opportunity to criticize this meeting. We'll give you guys a look, and we'll react on the other end. Here it is.
This president has raised the profile of a dictator like Kim Jong-un.
This country is no safer when it comes to North Korea.
He keeps having these summits and meetings that really don't produce anything.
I don't have a problem with him sitting down and negotiating with our adversaries. I just don't want it to be a photo opportunity. We need real diplomacy.
I thought Bernie Sanders liked socialism.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I mean, I thought his answer was actually the most sensible. But these were some of the same people that stood up on the stage during the debates and talked about nuclear proliferation being one of the greatest threats to the United States, Christian.
Yeah, it's sort of bizarre world. I'm old enough to remember a time when it was sort of the Democrats who were more in favor of negotiations. And now they're saying the president can't talk to, for example, Russian President Putin, can't even have a discussion, can't do this with North Korea. And there's this crazy idea that I think the average American understands that maybe the PhDs from SAIS and others forget that if you want something from someone, you may actually have to talk to them. Also, we're not doing this in a vacuum. We had 8 years under Obama. They called it strategic patience. It amounted to doing nothing. North Korea did have a minor nuclear capability before the Obama administration, but as Chris pointed out, their capabilities expanded dramatically during that point, their long period of doing nothing.
Right.
The Bill Clinton administration appeased North Korea, gave them a whole lot of energy assistance in payola for nuclear capabilities. They never handed the administration, the first one that I served in, the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, did largely the same thing, gave them a lot of energy assistance and sanctions relief and got nothing in exchange. So I think we should give the president the benefit of the doubt for trying this something different.
You remember, John and Christian, when in the G20s under Obama, people didn't even pay attention to America. We were there to basically sign on to climate change and other international agreements. The Europeans were writing. This president, it is so. I was there in Osaka with him, seeing the standing America has, how everybody is on their toes, worried about what he thinks and what he's doing. It is such a dramatic sea change, but it's really good for America that this idea that America was leading from behind under Obama. Donald Trump has changed that dramatically and is really pushing the envelope. The Chinese came away with the moving in our direction on the tariffs, protecting billions of dollars of intellectual property, which previous administrations had allowed them to basically pilfer from American companies. The Russians. Donald Trump has, again, it's very similar to the relationship he's developed with Kim. He's trying to be friendly to Putin, who's not well liked around the world.
Well, Chris, let's hold that thought because we're going to talk about Vladimir Putin and the rest of the G20 coming up. We've got to get to a short commercial break here. But Christian Whiten and Christopher Ruddy are coming back with us. We are going to talk about President Trump and was he tough enough on the Saudis? And even Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit, can he be tough enough for his critics ever? That's what we'll discuss next right here on Newsmax Now. Stay with us.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems or go to NewsmaxTV.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.